and welcome to our video, Spill the Teach. I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Frida.
And today's video is very special because it's going to be featured in the ELT Fest. Isn't that great for the ELT community?
Not really.
Like no one asked you.
Okay, let's just continue.
All right. Well, in this fest, we celebrate today the teaching of tomorrow.
Exactly. And we will be featured in this ELT Fest, and you will be able to see more videos about teaching with some of the best teachers from the BA.
Which BA, by the way?
The BA in ELT from Culiacán, Sinaloa, from West.
But that's the one who got you.
I know, right?
Are we the best?
Well, I'm not gonna answer that, but you already know.
Oh my god, I'm shocked.
What can you tell me about one of the things that you struggle the most when teaching?
Probably classroom management when they are large groups. Yes, and especially if you're working with kids. Because I remember when I first started teaching, I had like around 20 something children in the classroom, and it was a lot to have control over, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it can be very unpredictable.
Yeah, so that's tough. But also like giving instructions, like having students to have clear what they are going to be doing in the class, that's also hard because some of them might take it too literal and some of them they're going to be completely lost. Like,
yeah, especially if they are kids.
Yes. And actually not even kids, because I remember one time from my experience as a student. Exactly. I was in middle school. I was around 13 years old. And my teacher asked us to bring some material. And in that material, we had to bring some a stick box. The ones that you use to clean your mouth. Well, your gum teeth. And the thing is that he asked just for the box. He said that you're going to bring a box of sticks. So it was like, okay. I went to my mom and I asked her to get some. And well, she brought the box. And then I took it to school. And when the class came, then my classmates, they took him out and they put him on the table. And I was like, wait a second. I was like holding my little box, empty box to be specific. And my teacher was like, 1 second, what are the sticks? And it was like, well, teacher, you asked for the box, like the literal box. And I felt kind of dumb because like the instruction that he gave was to have the sticks in that. But yeah, I took it to literal.
Yeah, literally.
Yes, literally. What about you?
Well, I think that one of the things that it's not that I struggle, but when you're first teaching, you're also learning to teach. And it was a little bit confusing using students L1 because you don't really know how to properly manage it, because especially if your students are beginners, it's hard for them to understand everything in English. So you have to give them hints and stay at their level to make them understand you.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. Well, now that you're like putting that in the table, what's your thought about using L1 in the classroom?
Well, I think I have two answers for that. Like, from my experience as a student and then now as a teacher. And I actually have one anecdote that...
Oh my God, tea time.
Yes, another tea time story. Because it's too personal for me, actually, this topic. Because I remember that at this point, I think I was like an intermediate level student. And some teachers, like we had already seen the present tense in grammar, and there was no way, like I couldn't understand it. And like I remember that our teachers told us from different levels, not just one, that we had to try not to translate. So I literally tried not to translate that grammar or that tense. So I just there was no way I couldn't understand it. And I remember that when I got into that level, this teacher explained this grammar tense in Spanish, and I literally felt like somebody switched something in my brain. It actually, one of my teachers called it the aha moment, because it literally felt like that. Like once my teacher explained it to me in Spanish, which is my first language, I understood it completely. Like I just didn't feel like I needed to read extra materials or do more exercises to understand it, because the teacher explained it in Spanish, and I completely got it. And I feel like my mind was blown, literally. So I take that example and that anecdote into my experience as a student, because I felt that this teacher didn't speak that much Spanish in the classroom, but he used it at certain points. So I think that him having the knowledge on when to apply it was very useful, and not only for me, but I think that for my classmates as well. And yeah, like as a student, I also have bad experiences when using Spanish, because there were other levels that we were more advanced, like me and my classmates were more advanced, and they would use Spanish kind of a lot. They overused it, and I felt like, well, the teacher is wasting his time or her time speaking Spanish when we can speak English and, take advantage of it. And he was kind of like losing that precious time speaking Spanish. And like now as a teacher, I kind of know why the teachers spoke Spanish, because you want to make sure that students are following you. But where teachers overuse it and teachers don't speak Spanish at all, which I kind of disagree of not using, exclusively using English, because you have to make sure that students are understanding. And I think that one way to make sure students are understanding is using Spanish.
I totally get that. Okay, Frida, now you're telling me that here in the Mexican context where we all speak the same L1. Now tell me, what happens when you have to teach somewhere you don't speak the language?
Well, that's an interesting question.
I know, right?
Yes.
Well, hopefully there are some strategies when we have to do that, because it'd be impossible for some American teacher going to China trying to teach Chinese but English. Well, it's going to be a challenge, of course, and it has to apply some strategies. So what are these strategies? Well, from the CELTA course, I got to watch some videos that were part of the study guides that we have to answer, and in them they were focusing just on teachers from England, but with students from Asia, other parts of Europe like France, Belgium, and other places that they weren't English speakers. So what they had to do in some of the lessons, they did struggle with some vocabulary at some point, or some words they weren't that clear for students. So what teachers had to do was to show them visuals, to do some mimics, to deliver the description of the object or the description of the action, or what was the other thing, even the meaning of the word. Do you think that's a good technique?
Well, I think that you're just taking the advantage of showing off. But I do kind of agree that I think that the main thing that you could take advantage is using visuals, especially if they're young learners. I think that using visuals is the best way for them to give them context in order for you to understand you.
Yeah, I totally get that. And the context of these students, they were around 20, 30 years old, so they were adults. And well, their level was not that low as a kid would have. It was not an A1 or an A2. It was more around a B1 or a B2. So that also has to do with it, as you were mentioning.
Again, you're just showing up.
Well, not gonna say that in the comment.
Oh, come on.
All right.
Well, I know that there is an approach that it actually has to do with everything that we have talked about. It's actually the EMI approach.
What's that?
Have you heard of it? Never heard?
No.
Well, the EMI approach, it's using English as a medium instruction, as the acronyms mentioned. It's English as a medium instruction. And this approach is applied to multilingual learners, which is using...
Wait, 1 second there. What do you mean by multilingual learners?
Well, multilingual learners mean that they are learning a second language, but they are not learning it directly from their first language.
Oh, okay. I think I get it now.
So yeah, this approach is mainly applied on bilingual schools or international schools. And what do you think about the role of the first language when teaching a second language?
Well, from my perspective, when I was a student in my English classes, I didn't really like when my teachers would use Spanish because they relied a lot on it. Let's say it was 60-70% Spanish, and what was left, it was English. So it was not something balanced, you know? And honestly, the class was just like opening the book, answering this, answering that. It was nothing that meaningful or relevant for us. So it was too repetitive also. So it was boring. We didn't enjoy that. And now that I'm a teacher, I do use Spanish, yes. But as you mentioned before, in specific parts of the lesson. For example, when we're seeing grammar, when we're seeing vocabulary that is too complex for some students, then I do try to either translate or, as I said, showing visuals, mimics, definitions, trying to use as less Spanish, as less as L1 as I can. Because I believe that by using more English in the English class, it provides more input for students.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you mean. If students are learning English, they need to be exposed to the language.
Exactly.
Yes, but well, research has shown that it's not completely beneficial for students to exclusively use English in the classroom or the L2, because it is likely that students will get used to the language and they will learn it, but it takes time, and it is harder for students. And actually, what you're saying from your experience as a student, I think it has to do more with your teacher's preparation and teaching knowledge. Because as you mentioned, why you didn't enjoy the classroom, or you didn't feel that you were learning. And here, that's the thing, that we have to use the students L1 as an asset. Because actually, when we learn our mother tongue, our first language, and we learn to think, it's not just communicate it. It's not that we learn to communicate in our first language. We also learn to think. We learn to comprehend and understand in our first language. And those are the approaches that you have to focus your teaching on. Helping your students to understand a second language with the tool of their first language. And I think that is just wonderful. And research has shown that comparing in bilingual schools, when students exclusively are spoken in English and only speak English, and comparing it with students that use Spanish, not Spanish, their L1 and their L2, and students that mix their L1 and their L2 have shown better results, not only language wise, but also actually academic wise. They have shown better results when mixing two languages. And with these results, they show that both languages can coexist and it can able understanding and learning.
Yes. So in other words, what you're saying is first we have to know our first language in order to comprehend better the second language that we're going to be studying.
Well, yeah, I think that it has a lot to do learning your first language to actually being able to understand a second language. But what you're saying is completely right. I agree with you. But it also, in order to be able to understand a second language, it has a lot to do with your teacher's preparation and actually being to properly apply your L1 to teach you and make you understand the second language.
Well, yes, of course, it has to do with it. And that thing you said about languages coexisting themselves, I totally understand what you're saying, because I know the basics of French, and I know some advanced English, and Spanish is my mother tongue. So by knowing these three languages, I've noticed some...
Again, showing up.
I'm sorry, but I love that. Sorry, not sorry. So by knowing these languages, I've noticed some patterns in English, in French, in Spanish even. And also in other languages that I don't even speak, but I can notice some pattern in the sense of word formation, of the grammar, of how is it used to refer to other things. So I think that's amazing about languages.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's just wonderful. And like the example that you're mentioning is very clear, that you compare your first language with the target language that you have learned, and you don't need your teacher to explain, for example, a grammar structure, because you just compare it with your first language and you totally get it. Like, you don't need to waste that time, and it's just gonna make your head hurt, because you're gonna be thinking, be extra thinking and overthinking, and it's just gonna complicate your life more. You just compare it and then you learn it, you get it.
Exactly. So you have to be careful with translation, and this also has to do with cognates and false cognates. Cognates refer to the words that are the same in Spanish and, in this case, Spanish and English. That's the other language. For example, let's say chocolate, chocolate, elephant, elefante. And false cognates are the ones that they look similar, but they are completely different. For example, embarrassed and embarazada, it's not the same, right?
Yeah.
So that's also a problem for our students, and sometimes a problem for us, because sometimes our languages collide and we ended up saying words like complimento, for example. Paniquear, exactly. Like the one I told you, complimento, I was just talking with my sister, and I tried to say compliment, but also trying to say halago. So I was like, oh my God, what's happening in my head? And like, it just collided.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And this is kind of like what we have talked about is like it's very important that the teacher has a sufficient teaching knowledge to make learners to use Spanish and well, not Spanish, their first language and their second language to contrast and know the differences and to actually know when to use Spanish and when not to use it, like as you mentioned.
Exactly.
The teacher
Exploiting it.
Yeah, the teacher has the power to take that into consideration.
Exactly. Well, it was very interesting talk.
I know we have very interesting points.
Exactly. So thank you all for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Don't forget to check our other classmates' videos. They are very interesting as well. The description is gonna be down below. And like and subscribe.
See you soon.
Bye.